Well, hello everyone. Welcome again to Wellness by JF. As usual, I'm your host, Judy Fider, and today I'm excited to host someone who has a few things to brag about. Without wasting any more time, let him introduce himself.
Well, I have nothing to brag about as far as I know, but
Mhm,
I'm grateful to be here.
mhm,
My name is Moses. I'm a creative. I'd say I'm a creative.
mhm,
I roll on different platforms, on radio, on the podcast, and
mhm,
I'm also a writer on the side.
mhm.
Uh, I think that's the best way I could describe myself. I find it really hard to do so.
Uh-huh.
I think I'll grow old and I'll have like a profile for
Uh-huh.
what I do, but that's definitely where I describe myself right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
When I said you have something to brag about,
Yeah.
it's because when I was getting into the podcasting world, especially in mental health,
Yeah.
your podcast and your name came up a lot.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say receive your flowers, don't fight it.
Yeah. I really find it so hard to do so,
Uh huh.
but I'm really grateful. I
Mm
get that a lot,
hmm. Mm
and I'm grateful that I created something that was maybe the first of its kind,
hmm. Mm
and now it's helping lots of people on a daily basis. It's helping people like you create yours
hmm. Mm hmm.
and advance yours. So I can't really say I'm a pioneer because, well, there's people who's been doing it for years,
Mm hmm.
but I'd say I'm really happy. Well, I clap for myself too.
Mm hmm.
So I think it should start with me. I
Uh huh.
do that a lot.
Uh
I
huh.
clap for myself for what I've done.
Uh
I
huh.
think I'm almost clocking a year now,
Mm
and
hmm.
it's been pretty cool. So yeah, I take that a lot. I'm really grateful.
Uh huh.
I'm grateful for the comments. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And thank you so much for
Uh,
coming and for bearing with the arrangement. I know it was a
well, this
bit
is
of a.
home, so
Uh-huh.
yeah, I'm home. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So, what would you say maybe was your inspiration to start a mental health podcast?
The inspiration. Um, it was the season that I was in.
Okay.
Um, I wasn't doing well
Mm-hmm.
mentally at that time, and at that time I was actually, funny enough, I was looking at documentaries and things to do with mental health. So at that time I was actually spending most of my time, because I work in the afternoon. So in the morning I would spend most of the time looking at addiction documentaries. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
addicted to anything at
Mm-hmm.
that time, but I was really curious on why 90% of the documentaries would end with Moses relapsed after 3 months
Uh-huh.
and he went back. There's like only 10% who I'd get the message, or the ending would be he's been sober for 7 years, for 8 years. It
Mm-hmm.
was always ending with 4 months and blah blah blah. So I decided to. I got this interest because I was struggling mentally at that time, and I
Okay.
realized one of the common things in all these struggles was the beginning. It wasn't the ending, and by the beginning I mean I noticed there was common issues with guys who were spending most of the times on meth or on
Mm-hmm.
cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
So at that time I had this ding moment where, and until today, I think it's been a few years, and I don't see drugs as a problem. And I think that's weird. I keep it to myself. I don't
Mm-hmm.
see alcohol as a problem in the
Mm-hmm.
society. Yeah, we say it is, but I don't think it is. I think the reason why we're drinking alcohol too much is the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got that, I decided to I signed up for psychology school
Okay.
right in like I was on my laptop, and
Uh-huh.
and I was like, why is this happening? I need to know why these people are
Uh-huh.
this way. So the next tab I opened looked for schools that I would learn these
Okay.
things, and I went in.
Uh-huh.
And so I was reading this book. I read a lot. So
Mm-hmm.
it's called Dopamine Nation, where it talks about how our society today is so stimulated with
Mm-hmm.
with everything, social media. And so I had this another ding moment. It's like, okay, why can't I start a podcast about the
Mm-hmm.
opposite of what this book teaches?
Mm-hmm.
If we're overstimulated, then I would love to have a podcast where I talk about the opposite. So I
Mm-hmm.
came up with the word unstimulate, which is not an English word.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in the dictionary, but it made sense to me at that point. I had equipment. I had a home studio So because I have a background in radio and stuff like that, so
Mhm.
I just looked around. I was looked around me. I saw the mic. I saw the sound card. I was like,
Uh-huh.
what am I waiting for?
Uh-huh.
So then I looked around. I saw there was none,
Uh-huh.
and I just went into it.
Wow.
I just went for it. I was really afraid of everything that would come after that, the stigma around
Mhm.
it. I realized there was none.
Mhm.
I went to Spotify, looked for mental health podcasts in Kenya. There was none.
Mhm.
Went to Apple Podcasts. There was none. So I knew this is gonna go either left or right. I
Mhm.
didn't know what left meant or right meant, but I
Okay.
knew it was gonna go both ways.
Uh-huh.
And then I did the first episode. I posted it, and then I slept. And
Mhm.
then I think I gave it like 3 4 days, and then I created an Instagram page, and then messages just filled after like the first episode. Then
Mhm.
I got this message from, I think it was Chatable. I think they do more chats. Then I was
Mhm.
like, "Oh, your podcast is chatting." Where and I was like, "What is this now? Like,
Mhm.
what is not happening?"
Mhm.
I thought I had said the wrong thing, so I went back and listened to the episode. I said, "No, I haven't said anything wrong.
Mhm.
I just said what I had scripted because I script a lot."
Mhm.
And that's been that way for the last maybe 10, 11 months. Yeah,
Okay.
that's been the journey, I'd say.
Wow, the
Yeah.
journey is quite interesting.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I've barely shared this story,
Uh-huh.
so I think you're the first one to to know how I came up with it. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah, we're quite honored actually when you accepted to come on the
Yes,
set.
yes. I said this is the first time, and then with my radio background, I'm used to
Uh-huh.
asking questions.
Uh-huh. You
Yeah, and
mentioned.
then with my job, what I do, I'm used to being where you are.
Mhm.
So being here is Jesus Christ. What is she gonna ask next? So yeah.
I hope we can make you comfortable.
Yes, yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay. How long would you say the podcast has been? You mentioned 10 to 11 months.
Yeah, 10 to 11 months. Not really sure. When did the first? You know what's weird is I started this as a different podcast. Now
Okay.
this is the thing on clarity and knowing
Uh-huh.
exactly what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
There's no problem with changing the direction of where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
So long as you know the destination, maybe you could change the direction right now. Because
Mm-hmm.
I started it maybe the year before, but it didn't have the same name.
Mm-hmm.
It was in a different category. I wasn't struggling. Well, I've been struggling my whole life, but at that time, the clarity wasn't there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think I did like 2 episodes, and then I just felt like this isn't it. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I had like the whole idea, I knew this is it now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you listen to the first episode, I think it was maybe February, but now the whole podcast began in June.
Okay.
And I decided not to delete those episodes so that I
Mm-hmm.
could remind myself that this is it. This wasn't the idea at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but this is now the real idea. I think for me, every time I look at it, it's the idea that I had at the beginning. It was
Mm-hmm.
the wrong idea, maybe wrong timing,
Mm-hmm.
but now to move across to mental health, I think that was the right idea.
Ah.
Yeah. So if you go to episode 1, it's something totally different, but
Mm-hmm.
episode 4 is now the podcast.
That's when you gained the clarity.
Yes, that's when I gained the clarity, and I decided I want to delete the first episode. I
Uh-huh.
want it to stay there
Okay.
for me, and yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
for me. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. And in terms of your resources,
yeah.
where would you say you get your most resources out of to inform what you speak on the podcast?
Well, as I mentioned, I had to sign up for psychology class.
Uh-huh.
The reason why I did, um, I'm not big on social media,
Mm-hmm.
so I barely log in. I barely have. I always have the Instagram account for the
For the
yeah, for
podcast.
the podcast. I
Uh-huh.
barely check it. What I did is I just did my thing with. I think there's tools that I use to access social media,
Mm-hmm.
but you barely find anything about me on social media because I have my reservations on social media. Um, so I felt like I never wanted to be an advocate for mental health
Mm-hmm.
with just an advocate. I didn't want to be an influencer for it.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to come from an informed place.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to actually know the nitty gritties of psychology first, so that when I open my mouth, when I run my mouth on the podcast, I know what I'm saying. And so that's why the premise is it's based on neuroscience, which I had to study again. I had to study CBT and psychotherapy and all those things. So now when I combine all of them
Mm-hmm.
and my personal experiences, I'm able to put out what I do every single week.
Okay.
So it came from, it's always me being informed first.
Mm-hmm.
It's not based on what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I'm feeling like crap, but I still show up and do, because I feel I'm doing it for the one who's feeling low.
Mm-hmm.
So the resources, I'd say it's the education that I have,
Mm-hmm.
and then the mix of personal experiences and things I see.
Mm-hmm.
I always notice people and say, yeah, well, I'll notice how people are reacting to things.
Mm-hmm.
I watch documentaries. I spend most of my time reading, and everything else informs the next episode and the
Mm-hmm.
next episode and the
Uh-huh.
next episode. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
So you mentioned something interesting.
Yeah.
I know I also had the same question
All right.
about you not wanting to speak from a point of just your own
Yeah.
experiences
Yeah.
or as an influencer.
Yeah.
And I know that that question came up for me as well.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, so what should I do so that I'm able to speak from a point of authority?
Yeah.
Do you think there should be a fine line
Yeah.
between who can speak to mental health issues
Yeah.
and who cannot?
No, there
Okay.
shouldn't be any fine line. Um, Everybody should be able to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The line should be drawn when it comes to medication for
Uh-huh.
things like anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the job of a psychiatrist comes in, you know. But if you sign up for a course in psychiatry and you become a psychiatrist
Mm-hmm.
and you're a football player, you have authority.
Mm-hmm.
You could prescribe medication for someone in anxiety. You
Mm-hmm.
understand?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the levels, there's level one, there's level two. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I didn't want to be an influencer for mental health.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be, I don't even identify myself as an advocate for the same,
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted to go deeper and deeper. I wanted to understand me first. I
Mm-hmm.
had to understand why I was the way I was at
Mm-hmm.
that time. So with that, I was able to understand people. You
Uh-huh.
understand?
Mm-hmm.
So long as I was able to understand why I was always anxious, why I'm still very anxious all the time. Now I knew more about medication,
Mm-hmm.
so that gives me maybe step 4, at step 5, but
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make me a bigger person in mental health than
Mm-hmm.
the one who's at level 1. Because I don't
Yes.
have 10 million followers on Instagram,
Uh-huh.
but somebody has 10 million,
Okay.
and just by saying this is what anxiety means could
Mm-hmm.
influence those 10 million people.
Yes.
So the line can only be drawn, that's according to me, when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to things like medication and stuff like that. But who should influence, who should say what? We all should. You
Mm-hmm.
should, everyone here should.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone should have a role to play in it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I hear you. In terms of mental health
Yeah.
in Kenya, what would
Yeah.
you say is your experience in terms of finding resources,
Yeah.
in terms of the cost of finding the resources,
Yeah.
and even the kind of information that is out there, correct information?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Correct information. I don't think there's anything different that we have
Mm-hmm.
than what's there in Uganda, than what's there in Tanzania. I was in a conversation with somebody a few days ago, and she asked me the same question, but it had to do with suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Why are the rates so high?
Uh-huh.
I said, the rates, even if it's one person, the rates will always be
Be
high.
high.
Even if
Mm-hmm.
it's 10 people who are struggling with suicide,
Mm-hmm.
the rates will always be high.
Mm-hmm.
So we shouldn't say the rates were 50% last year and now they're 70%. We
Mm-hmm.
should worry about the 50 first.
Yes.
So when it comes to mental health, I'd say when it comes to resources, they're very scarce,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say. Information, very scarce. People who are struggling, more.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers, all of us are struggling in one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
But do I have access to a therapist? Is it affordable?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not.
Mm-hmm.
But now the problem isn't the therapist not being accessible. It's
Mm-hmm.
the stigma around looking for the
For
therapist.
therapy.
So
Uh-huh.
I'd say the stigma is the problem,
Mm-hmm.
not the mental health issues,
Mm-hmm.
not the accessibility to healthcare. It's the stigma that is the problem, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not just here. It's it's in the entire world. I think maybe
Mm.
in Africa we have our cultures that will make it worse
Yeah.
than in the
I
West
mean, we
or
are always
East.
strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are always making it.
that's the one thing that I'm always concerned about,
Uh-huh.
about where we are, because I
Uh-huh.
get lots of people who talk to me, approach me with mental health issues, and the only thing that they lack is a space to let out their anger, to cry,
Mm-hmm.
but it can't be home because maybe mom and dad haven't been the safe space that I need.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say the problem is accessibility to resources. It's first of all the stigma, because if we get rid of the stigma, people
Mm-hmm.
will actually go look for information about mental health. People will consume more mental health podcasts like
Mm-hmm.
yours and
Mm-hmm.
mine.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is not the information is in my podcast or yours,
Mm-hmm.
but somebody actually needs to listen for 20 minutes. So the
Mm-hmm.
stigma around listening to us for 20 minutes is the problem.
Yes,
It's not the
correct.
content, actually. Yeah.
Correct. Have you had people maybe walk up to you and say, we consume your podcast, we consume your content,
Yeah.
but they're not ready or they're not willing to follow it through, probably by sending DMs. They'd rather consume it in private. That's what
Yeah.
I mean.
Yes. Yes. I
Uh-huh.
think they're more than the ones who
Yes,
actually
that's the
send in.
uh-huh.
Being on radio on a daily basis, I think has taught me that that is bound to happen. I'm
Uh-huh.
never surprised by the stats on the podcast or the messages I get on social media, because I'm always on that same seat in a
Uh-huh.
different platform on a daily
Uh-huh.
basis. So
Uh-huh.
you meet people in the streets and they say, ah, I know you. This happens. I would listen
Mm.
to you, but you'll never find them calling in or texting in when you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are the best kind of messages. I had one person. I did an episode. I think the first 2 3 episodes.
Mm.
So I just met them. I was like, you know what? When I listened to that, I totally do it afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So it was me telling people, just do whatever you want, afraid as you feel.
Mm-hmm.
So they listened to the episode, and the following morning they went and looked for a job without actually, I think they hadn't finished university and stuff like that. They just did it afraid and they got the job.
Uh-huh.
So when they told me, I was like, well, I don't even remember recording that episode.
Uh-huh.
It was like 9 minutes long,
Uh-huh.
but it had that
Ah, it
impact
had
on
that
you.
impact.
It's like,
Yes.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's something.
Mm-hmm.
I get that a
Okay.
lot more than social media.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. I've gotten that a number of times too.
Yeah.
And I think that informs the whole idea why you want the conversations to be more comfortable, the
Yeah.
conversations to be more open, right?
Oh, yeah. Sure, sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Mm.
Um, Another thing I'd like to ask, you mentioned something about fear.
Yeah.
How did you overcome that fear?
How did I overcome that fear?
Yes.
I don't think I have, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't think I have, but I've always been introverted.
Mm-hmm.
And as I told you, I looked back at my home studio and I said, you know what? I don't really have to do much. I only need to sit here.
Mm-hmm.
I only need my laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I actually just need my voice to put my voice on this one.
Exactly. Uh-huh.
So it's like I boxed the fear and told
Mm-hmm.
it we're not going outside. Have you read Big Magic by, I think it's Liz Gilbert? She talks
No.
of talking to your fears when
Uh-huh.
it comes to creativity and stuff like. It's a really good book for creatives.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I was just like, you know what, we're not leaving the house,
Mm-hmm.
because I was really anxious at that time. My anxiety was really high, but I said, you know what? This wasn't the thing I was supposed to do at the beginning. But
Mm-hmm.
now that I'm struggling,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going outside. It's like I told myself, let's not go outside. Let's record it here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's edit it here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll upload it here.
Uh-huh.
Whoever gets it will get it.
Uh-huh.
And then with the podcast now growing and going up,
Mm.
I just found myself doing it every week. And I've never stopped. I've never gone a week without doing something or saying something to the microphone. I can't say I've overcome that fear because I'm still afraid of hitting the wrong button,
Mm-hmm.
having a conversation or saying something that is scientifically wrong,
Yes.
because I merge lots of science
Mm-hmm.
with psychology and my personal experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I still battle imposter syndrome more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
But I think ever since I was a kid, I'll just run. I'll keep running.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a bad thing. My therapist told me it could be a bad thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I told her, you know what, I'm going to keep running.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather keep running than stop doing it and then say I gave up because I was fearful.
Uh-huh.
I'll always just keep doing it.
Uh-huh.
There's fear of never becoming, I don't know, big.
Mm.
But now, what I did, I realized I can't be Adele Onyango. My
Mm-hmm.
podcast will never be. I'll never be the influencer who's on the billboard. If I ever get to
No,
that,
says who?
I'll be okay with it. But the thing is,
Uh-huh.
I came to a place where I realized with the content that I do, I don't do
Yes.
controversial stuff. I don't do weekly, what's been
Yes.
happening across the week.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to put out something that even if it's 10 years from now, somebody can listen to episode 5. Like
Mm-hmm.
somebody, people, I look at the stats, I see people looking at episode 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I always wanted to put something that will stick there,
Mm-hmm.
not something that will keep refreshing and refreshing. That's
Uh-huh.
why it's never about me.
Mm-hmm.
I rarely talk about, how my week has been, and
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing wrong with that. But that also boxes the fear
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure this will never change. I
Uh-huh.
didn't say something wrong. I didn't
Uh-huh.
say that I'm the coolest person in the
The
world.
world, uh-huh.
Yes, so that doesn't affect my personality. It's facts,
Uh-huh.
it's facts, it's scientific facts. You
Mm-hmm.
like it, you don't like it,
It's
it's
there.
facts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that kind of influences the fear. Kidogo kidogo too.
Ah.
Yeah,
Wow. Allow me to say this.
yeah.
Coming into this interview, I actually had a set of questions,
Oh,
and I know I shared them with you,
yeah,
but I like the conversation and how it's going, so I'm gonna
yeah.
shelve that. And
I also don't do prepare questions. I
uh-huh.
think the people I've hosted, I just flow with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I like hosting people that I've listened to and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
Questions are cool, but I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure you'll
They'll
just
box you
yeah, they'll
into that
box you to something. Yeah,
particular,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes. Okay. So I'll just flow with
Free
how it
fire.
is, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've mentioned again that you had a bit of struggles
Yes.
with your own mental health.
Yeah.
Would you mind sharing a bit more details on that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, I just found out that I had ADHD.
Okay.
I just didn't know, and
Mm-hmm.
that crushed me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, I was just having a conversation with my therapist, and she was like, yeah, yeah, I survived through it without my knowledge for so many years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was just recently. But I think my biggest struggles have always been anxiety. That I'm still trying to find, not necessarily look for the origin or why these things happened,
Mm-hmm.
but to actually know how to navigate life. I think I've functioned in dysfunction for so long
Mm-hmm.
until when I realized that I haven't been okay because I was functioning in dysfunction for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's only like an experience that will allow you to realize that, you know what, yeah, you've actually been depressed your whole life. You just never realized it. And that was me,
Mm-hmm.
You've been it's the only thing you've known.
Mm-hmm.
It's like fear is the only thing you've known for so long.
Mm-hmm.
For someone to tell you or to now realize that there's actually life without being fearful or
Mm-hmm.
living with panic attacks, that's something different. If
Mm-hmm.
you've suffered from certain sickness for like 25 years, and then now it's no longer in your body,
Mm-hmm.
life is going to be a struggle because
Mm-hmm.
that's the only thing you've known.
Mm-hmm.
You've known the pain of your hand and stuff like that. So my biggest struggle is actually navigating life without feeling anxious. Actually realizing that, like recently, oh, you want to tell me I had all those years and I didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to a point where everything, it's like childhood trauma.
Mm-hmm.
One day it'll get to you.
Mm-hmm.
One day it will, whether you're 15 or 45.
Yes.
Although I'm glad it just got to me when I'm still in like my early 20s and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So I'd say my struggle started when everything now started like showing up all the signs and symptoms. It's
Mm-hmm.
like they were in a dark place as I was growing up through school. And then they just started showing up and
Mm-hmm.
showing up and showing up. And the anxiety started getting worse. And I couldn't control myself in different ways. Um, yes, it just kept showing up and showing up. They still show up,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm glad that I'm at a place where I do lots of therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the podcast is such a great space for me to do.
Therapeutical, right?
Yes, therapeutical.
Uh-huh.
Whenever I do it, whenever I record it, there's just life is opening up. I can't say
Uh-huh.
that I'm at the end of the journey. I think it's a
Mm-hmm.
journey,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm glad that I'm not where I was like 2 years ago or a year
Mm-hmm.
ago. Yeah, I've done lots of growth in different ways. So my struggles are always around anxiety. Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest struggles I've had. I think the last time I did an assessment, no, actually the first time I went to therapy, I just walked in and I told my therapist, you know what, don't be sad, don't be sad, just
Mm-hmm.
chill, chill.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be sad, don't cry,
Mm-hmm.
don't cry. It's gonna hurt you, but
Mm-hmm.
don't cry.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like the most beautiful moment I've had in my life because I let out everything that I had in me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we did an assessment, and the results were not cool
Mm-hmm.
because she was shocked and I wasn't.
Okay.
Just like, oh Jesus Christ, you mean this is how you survive every day? It's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, what's the problem? She saw the problem, I didn't, and that now made me feel worse
Mm-hmm.
because you wanna tell me my anxiety rates are that high? It's like abnormal,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just okay with
And
it.
you like for you, there's no
Yes,
difference.
there's no difference. I was like,
Uh,
I felt that. I was like, how long have you been feeling? She's like, how long have you been feeling? It's like my whole life. Like, how have you been surviving? I said, well,
mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm still surviving.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like a very horrific moment for me. Now I have to learn to reduce all of that
Mm-hmm.
and live without it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like living without the person you've known for so long and has been part of you. And now you realize you didn't need that person or that person
Mm-hmm.
was weighing you down. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a grief process, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Two questions that fall out from what you've just said.
Yeah.
One, I'd like you to share more on what it's like to live with ADHD
Yeah.
in your own words.
Yeah.
Like, what was your own experience from childhood up until now?
What was with ADHD? It's more on. I was doing some research recently because I haven't even found out exactly how that thing works. Because my therapist was like, "Oh, those struggles, those were some symptoms of ADHD." So
Mm-hmm.
apparently, there's a period where learning and growth for children happens.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think I always joke that there's some spark plug somewhere in my brain that got burnt, and it was probably because I got diagnosed with a heart condition when I was 7 years, 8 years old. I
Okay.
didn't have a normal childhood growing up because I was
Mm-hmm.
always sick. I was always in the hospital. I had to spend, I think, 11, 12 years in meds,
Mm-hmm.
injections per month. You know, it wasn't the easiest moment. And I had to like let in a lot of things into my mind that weren't supposed to be in my head. I don't think a 9-year-old shouldn't be in the hospital every month
Mm-hmm.
for meds. The injections would take me out for like 4 days. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'd get injected on Monday. I'm gonna wake up and actually start running on Friday, and that happened every single month. Like
Mm-hmm.
January, I'd go to school for 3 weeks. The fourth week, I'm out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the development of maybe my brain, my mind during that period
Mm-hmm.
led me to having a problem with attention. So ADHD is more on attention, like losing focus,
Mm-hmm.
concentrating on something. And you know what's crazy? I didn't realize it until now when
Mm-hmm.
I'm way past that age that I realized. So I didn't do very well in my exams. I
Mm-hmm.
never did well, despite being like a little genius in my head.
Mm-hmm.
On paper, I wasn't really good at in primary school. It's not that
Okay.
I was the worst kid in class. I was always good
No,
at
no, say
different
the truth
things.
now.
I wasn't the worst. I wasn't the. Do I look like I was the worst? I wasn't the worst. But I wasn't. I wasn't. In my head, I should be number two, three, four.
Uh-huh.
But I'm number 15. Do
Okay.
you understand?
Mm-hmm.
Like in my head, I should be where you are,
There.
but I'm
Uh-huh.
here.
Uh-huh.
And I was always like, it always made me feel really bad
Mm-hmm.
because I was never there where I should be in my head. So that happened in primary school. Of course, I didn't fail in
Mm-hmm.
anything, but it's just that I knew that I was better than where I was
Mm-hmm.
through to high school. And then I got cleared when I was done with high school, and then I got into uni, and then my genius starts showing up.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I got off meds, and now I'm right there. I did very well in my classes in uni, and I didn't struggle. I was just telling my therapist, I never struggled in uni. Like I was like the genius that I should have been back then. It was not in my head, it was also on paper.
Uh-huh.
It was both on paper and in my head. And so when I was telling us like, yeah, you had ADHD, you just didn't know. But now I'm really grateful for it, because if I didn't have it, maybe I'd pass and I'd go to do some engineering course and I'd be struggling, the worst engineer right now. So I think everything just worked out for good.
Yeah.
But ADHD, I think, has to do with attention. And then there's the hyperactivity part, where I think that's more sensitive, where you'll find maybe children do things like, I'll just drop these books and I don't realize that I've dropped them. There are different levels. I don't want to speak largely on it because I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. But there's lots of information online. I'm also still learning, but I don't want to go back to it. I don't want to like dig holes that to like dig graves and say this is it. I'm more focusing on the now and what I'm like experiencing right now rather than that. For me, when she told me that, I was like, oh, so that was the reason why I never did well in school. She's like, yeah, that's why. I was like, okay, cool. I think I've suffered a lot. That didn't hit me hard. Like my body has taken in so much in terms of meds, like 12 years on meds every month. And I couldn't work for like 5 days every single month, couldn't go to school. So for you to tell me ADHD was a problem, like, I've had a lot. So that wasn't a problem. Yeah.
And how quick or how difficult was the diagnosis now as an adult?
It wasn't so, it's not easy. I think you have to like do sit downs with a professional so many times, because you think you know the problem until you sit down and realize, no, that's not the problem. You could think you have maybe an anxiety problem, and maybe it's just stress. It's just, you're just stressed out from work, and maybe it's just grief. It needs like a process with a certified professional. It might hurt to know exactly what problem. For me, it hurt a lot. Just realize that, have I just been suffering for this long without my knowledge? But for some people, it'll be like clarity. Now I know. Now I need meds for this. It just depends. I can't necessarily say this is how it feels. This is how it looks like. But what I do advise is you need to have a conversation with a professional in mental health, and it's not me.
Yeah.
I think I'm just there for the vibes, to share what I know, and maybe link you up with somebody who can help you. But in terms of diagnosis, even from my experience with my heart problem, you just need somebody who has all the facts and all the science
Yes.
around it. Yeah.
There's also something that came out,
Yeah.
normalizing
Yeah.
how you feel, even though sometimes you do not feel your best,
Yeah.
but you feel like maybe this is it, maybe this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
What can you say that you would do differently
Yeah.
in terms of addressing maybe when you're not feeling well, or addressing when you're not sure really, even as a child or
Yeah.
as a teen, what's going on?
I'd say I'd cry.
Ah.
I'd say I'd cry. Because I had to go to the hospital when I wasn't sick. I was just on long-term meds, so I wasn't ever sick. So I'd actually walk in feeling okay. I remember there was a time I walked into the hospital like this door, and I was just, yeah, I'm in for injections,
Like for the usual?
yeah, for the usual just injections, and I'm leaving out. I can't even walk. Like I walked in fine, and I'm leaving out like I can't walk. And I never cried. I never allowed myself to feel it. The only thing I'd change, I'd say I'd cry. I'd just cry and let the feelings out, because I never did that. And now that I didn't allow myself to cry, by crying, I think it's a show of emotions, because I was always like, you gotta be the man. And I'm 10 years old, man. Like those are the things running in my mind at 11 years old. Like, yeah, you gotta be strong. You have to like show up, next month we're still on it. I shouldn't have had those conversations in my head when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. But now that I did, I should have just cried and be a normal 12-year-old. Like just cry like let everybody in that hospital know
Know
that
that you're
I'm
not
suffering, you
okay.
know.
Uh-huh.
I feel like if I did, that would allow me to feel like a child, to feel vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
because I was always trying to be strong.
Mm-hmm.
But now look where that got me,
Mm-hmm.
like 10, 15 years later. So I'd say I'd cry.
Mm-hmm.
I'd cry a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. I think that
Yeah.
mental health issues, especially in children, let alone in
Yeah.
adults, they largely go undiagnosed.
Yes.
No one ever speaks about it.
Yeah.
As a child, there is that progression that we expect. You go to
Yeah.
kindergarten and do your best and be the best,
Yeah.
and our kids are always number one.
Yeah. I'd even say if I wish I'd been a crazy kid,
Mm-hmm.
like out of all that pain, I'd say I wish I had like taken the laptop and thrown it to the wall
Mm-hmm.
out of frustrations on why I was on meds, because I
Mm-hmm.
was always questioning, but I was questioning them in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I was questioning things. I was suffering in my head,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't like expressing them out.
Uh-huh.
I wish I'd run away from school
Mm-hmm.
for like a week, and then maybe they'd come find me and say, maybe he has a problem. Is it the meds? Maybe it's the meds. So can
Mm-hmm.
we take the kid to the psychiatrist or something like that? Can we get somebody to talk to the kid? But I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I
Mm-hmm.
just survived through it. I just showed up strong. And that's why I said I functioned in dysfunction for so long until it caught up with me later.
Uh-huh.
So that's something I'd change. I'd cry. I'd show up as a kid.
Uh-huh.
I'd run away from school.
Mm-hmm.
I'd do something crazy at home. I
Mm-hmm.
always wanted to do all those things. But
Mm-hmm.
now I was like, you know what? You're not a normal kid. You
Mm.
need to stay strong for the team. And the team is me, you know. Take one for the team. And I'm the team.
And you're the
So
team.
yeah, I'm the team. So I shouldn't have had adult conversations in my head while I was
Uh-huh.
12. I should have just been a 12-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
if you could speak to parents
Yeah.
who the children have some form or the other
Yeah.
of ADHD or any other mental disorder,
Yeah.
what would you say, what would be your advice? What would you say to them?
Um, well, I'm not a parent right now, but what would I want my parents to do?
What
That
would you want your child to do?
what,
If your own child, supposing your child,
mm,
put yourself into a father position
yeah,
and you have a child and that child is you.
yeah.
Uh-huh. What
I'd
would you
give them a
want?
hug.
Uh-huh.
I'd always give them a hug.
Mm-hmm.
I'd help them run away from school if they needed to. I'd be the crazy parent. But what I'm trying to say is,
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand that they're not normal kids anymore. They'll never grow up the way other kids are growing up.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean you isolate them from the rest. That means you take good care of them and in a very special way.
Mm-hmm.
One day they won't do well in school. And you also need to realize that maybe it could be the meds, it could be the struggles they have. So
Mm-hmm.
that means you can't scold them for not doing well in school. Um, I'd sign up for classes for parents who are, special kids in
Mm-hmm.
those ways. I'd do research on how to take care of such a kid,
Mm-hmm.
because the moment you realize that my kid has a mental health struggle, it's like that they have special needs,
Mm-hmm.
because they do have special needs.
Mm-hmm.
So how you treat the firstborn, secondborn should be the way you treat the thirdborn who's
Mm-hmm.
struggling. But then again, you want that kid to feel special because they already feel not sufficient,
Uh-huh.
because they could be struggling in school. So you
Yes.
want to give them pat in the back.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to compare them with other kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yet deep down, it could be the hand that is a problem. It could be the mental health problem. You just need to acknowledge that they are special and they need special care.
Mm-hmm.
The acknowledgement is the most important
Most
thing,
important
because that
thing.
will inform what you do next.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree.
Mm.
Let's go back to the podcast.
Yeah.
What would you say is the best episode you've done so far?
The best episode.
Uh-huh.
Hmm. What's the best episode I've done? Is it based on stats or
Not
me?
you, based on you, not based on stats. Yourself that you really put in
Mm.
to yourself and you felt like, wow, this one I've done my best. I've done myself on this one.
I don't know the number,
Mm-hmm.
but I know there's one I did on how overstimulated we are in the society today.
Uh-huh.
It was based on social media. I was actually explaining why I'm not on social media
Uh-huh.
and the science of social media and stuff like that. I think it's called overstimulation is a silent pandemic. I did loads of, I let out everything in that episode. It was one of the first few episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that episode because it informed every other episode. That's
Uh-huh.
why I really like it.
Uh-huh.
It's not the most listened to episode.
Mm-hmm.
The most listened to episode had other people in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I couldn't say that's my favorite, even though it had the most impact.
Mm-hmm.
It actually led more people into the podcast. I think
Ah.
is when the charts went up on the
Mm-hmm.
charts. But my favorite one is overstimulation is a silent pandemic. I'm not sure which number that one is, but I'm
Okay.
sure it's among the first 10, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Earlier on, you
Yeah.
mentioned something that sometimes you don't even feel like showing up, but you have to show up.
Yeah.
Where do you get your motivation from
To show up,
to show up and to do the podcast?
well, I don't rely on motivation.
Uh-huh.
I don't rely on it.
What do you rely on?
I rely on discipline
Uh-huh.
more than motivation.
Uh-huh.
Motivation is like a candle, you know. It's like it's just gonna burn, and then one day it's gonna go off.
Mm-hmm.
I have I don't have problem with motivational speakers or inspirational speakers. I like them a lot. I like some, but I like the people who go deep into discipline and things like that because the science of motivation is that it's like a wind, you know, it will flow and like for example, there's days when I wake up and I have a headache, you know. You can be motivated when you're sick,
Mm-hmm.
when you're struggling mentally. But if you schedule your life to showing up every morning to record the podcast, then you're
Mm-hmm.
still gonna do it. You know, like the last 2 weeks, I haven't even been on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been feeling well. I've had therapy going on and stuff like that. So I recorded the podcast 3 weeks ago
Mm-hmm.
for this entire month, and I
Mm-hmm.
just scheduled them and ran away. I don't know how they're doing right now. So that was based on the discipline that I have more than
Mm-hmm.
motivation.
Mm-hmm.
But I keep going for the person who tells me this is where I get like there's some close friends of mine who say I listen to you every week
Mm-hmm.
and it helps me do the next 2 days, do the next 3 days. So I show up for that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on display. And it show up for myself too, because
Mm-hmm.
that moment where I just record, it's like
Mm-hmm.
the best moment of the weekend because I record on Sundays. It just feels great to edit
Mm-hmm.
and to research and to say, I said, then to edit again because I edit
Mm-hmm.
like 5 times, make mistakes all the time. It's just
Mm-hmm.
fun for me to do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Matters mental health.
Yeah.
Do you have a mentor?
Well, do I have one? A mental health?
Yeah.
Apart from the therapist?
Yeah, the new
Yes,
therapist.
I'd say maybe my therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I have. Maybe people podcast I listen to a lot, but I don't think I have like somebody who I say this is my mentor, like walks with me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe professionally the therapist, who I really like a lot.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, as a mentor, I think they're mentors mentally.
Mm-hmm.
I think therapists are mental mentors.
Yeah, they are. They
Yeah,
are.
yeah, I'd say my
And
therapist.
I love how you think that you're okay, but whenever you go into therapy,
Yeah.
your therapist just brings a whole new angle.
Yeah, sometimes I hate it though, because I always walk in trying to like feel like it's always sessions like this one,
Uh-huh.
and I always like to be in control.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's because of the now me growing up and things I've gone through. I always want to be in control,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I sit there, like she bosses me around and I feel so in a good way.
Uh-huh.
And I realize I can't be in control of this. And it helps me to let go of control of things,
Mm-hmm.
let somebody else figure out things for me,
Mm-hmm.
like give me things to work on in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I actually like it, even though sometimes it crashes me in a way that
Mm-hmm.
it breaks down all the doors that I have or the worlds that I've created in my mind. I do like it. By the end of the hour, I'm always feeling like, okay, it makes more sense. I've let go of a sudden burden
Mm-hmm.
and put them on the table, and somebody helps you like read the book, if you like this books, and it's a really cool thing, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. There's this issue of therapy.
yeah,
Therapy is not widely accepted.
yeah,
The uptake of it is very low,
yeah.
and there's a stigma
Mm.
around therapy.
Mhm.
What would you say therapy? What would be the role
Yeah.
therapy has played in your own life?
Therapy. Therapy has given me the space to cry, the crying that I should have cried. I told you, I didn't cry. Now that caught up with me. Now it's given me the space to do it, and it's given me a space to let go of things that I need to. You think you know things. You think you can figure out things on your own until you actually sit down with somebody who tells you, "Well, that was ADHD." I was like, "Wait, what are you telling me?" I thought that maybe I wasn't studying enough at that time. My struggle was, am I really studying enough? Am I showing up in my studies as I should? I should be number one. I'm number 12. So maybe I'm not studying enough. Or maybe I wasn't. And that crushed me mentally. But now I get the realization that, well, there was nothing wrong with me. I just had a mental health problem. And now that gives me such peace. And if I got that when I was 15, then I'm sure that I would navigate school better. So I wish, like the 15-year-old who's struggling with attention or reading right now, if they get that clarified right now, I'm pretty sure they'll do better. So it's given me space to learn who I am and what I should, how to navigate life. And I'd wish everybody would go to therapy once in a while.
Yes.
Just once in a while, a month, every 3 months, it's okay. Why do we go to checkups for our legs and our bodies, and we can't go for checkups in our minds? Yet our minds dictate everything, how our body works.
What do you think is the role that podcasts play in spreading awareness for mental health?
Well, first things first, I think podcasts are a new way of entertainment, information. It's just a new media coming from the traditional media background. I'd say podcasts are now becoming the next, or actually the stats. I think maybe the guys here can. I think they know better with the stats and how consumption of podcasts has grown over the last maybe 3-4 years. So now more people are listening to podcasts than traditional radios. It hurts me because I'm on both sides, because you know I'm losing people on this
On
side
the,
and gaining more on this side. So coming from both the traditional media and now the digital media perspective, it's easy to confess that podcasts and even YouTube, because I think now podcasts on YouTube, the consumption is very high. I'm not sure on the stats, but now that this new media is growing, it means that more people, more young people, even adults, people past 40s or 50s are consuming YouTube. And with the growth of digital media, it means the audience is more there than the traditional media. So now see platforms like Spotify have health categories for podcast. Some of the maybe top 10 or 20 most listened podcasts, you'll find there's one health or mental health podcast. Here in Kenya, I'm pretty sure there's none of the mental health podcasts in the top 10 or top 20. There was a time I was I think in the top 10, but I only stayed there for like a week, and then the others just came along. But you realize that now that podcasts are growing, whether it's an entertainment podcast or whether it's a comedy podcast, it means people are there. And when it comes to mental health, like for my podcast, for example, I don't push it, I don't advertise it a lot. But how do I get almost like 1,000 downloads per episode? It means there's people on the internet who stumble upon it. I think if you know how the algorithm works, it means that it's working in favor of health podcast, mental health podcast. And it's a good way to box the information and put it in a place where it's acceptable. It's becoming more acceptable every single day. And it's almost anonymous. I think podcasts are almost anonymous in terms of people who listen.
Yes.
You put it on your
And the
headphones.
podcaster.
Yeah, and the podcaster. Yeah, I'm not on the podcast is not on YouTube, mine. And I think that also plays role in mental, because the ones that I consume, I barely know how the guys look like. And I've never even cared to to go to Instagram, look for
Just look for them.
to look for them. I'm always just consuming information and consuming information. Consumption of mental health or psychological information is going up and going up, and that's informed by the stats on mental health podcast. If you see a mental health podcast at number 5 or just show up in the charts, stats don't lie. It means that people are consuming that. Look at the most self-help books. Even though I have my reservations on that industry, you realize that probably the most sold books around are self-help books. How
Correct.
to live a better life. It means that more people are trying to get better every single day, and it gives people like us hope that our podcast will also be a source of the same. And podcasting has played a big role, even though I think the stigma around mental health is affecting podcasting.
Yes,
It does.
it does.
It does. No offense to anyone, to podcasters around, but even the companies or the distributors of podcast, they will always go for the one that is maybe more controversial, where there's
Yes.
more listeners, where there's what I call overstimulation, of information and stuff like that. And the one that's talking about
Where there's drama.
with this drama and there's nothing wrong. You go get your money, and there's nothing wrong with that. But now for a podcast that is talking about anxiety, and that's what I told you. I accepted that I will never be number 1 in the country. Ain't no way this podcast talking about anxiety will do better than the one that is just random vibes, in the afternoon. It will never be number 1. But I'm content with the fact that even at number 50, at least there's some 2 people who are listening to it, and there's people who are getting impacted. So if you're thinking yours will get to number 1, I'm pretty. It'll never be a number 1.
You're gonna bust my bubble.
Yeah, now I've told everyone who I know is getting into it. I was like, we'll never be number 1, but let's be okay with the impact that we'll have where we are.
Yes.
There's no way the algorithm will ever pick you for, even it comes
Over.
to awards. I've never seen a mental health podcast, whatever. But
But I think I agree with
Yeah,
you
yeah.
on one end.
Yeah.
But I also think that there's room. The room is
Yes,
there,
there's
and sometimes
room,
when
yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
niche for you,
Yeah.
you carve out your own niche.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I agree with you
Yeah.
that that also has crossed my mind,
Yeah.
especially in the society that we live in,
Yes.
and the drama and everything else associated
There will
with.
always be, yeah. But you know what really pushes me every day is I realize that I don't need a seat at anybody's table. I've never, I just don't need a seat at a table for me to succeed in podcasting. I have my own definition of success now. So that means numbers might not mean success to me. So I've defined what I want my podcast to do. There was a time when I felt maybe if I host so and so in my podcast, I'll get the stats, I'll be better, I'll be a number 1. And I had loads of people I invited to the podcast, to friends in the media and things like that. But then I realized that I don't really need a seat at anybody's table. I could actually create mine. I could actually create my own little table and just be okay with it. So if you look at the episode, I never hosted any big person, even though there's people who would want to show up. But I realized for continuity, I'm just fine being me on the microphone and recording what I record, and the impact is just fine. I think we need to like define what success means to us. In podcast, everybody needs to do in podcasting. If it's numbers and getting more money, that's fine. If it's just making impact to people, like there's people who preach on podcasts, right? Like
Yes.
pastors and stuff like that. And when they do it, they never go for the numbers. They go for people who want to get saved. And if one person does, I think even the Bible says like they'll be rejoicing in heaven when one sinner repents and stuff like that.
Correct.
That's fine. It just depends on who you are
And what you're trying to achieve.
and what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. But there's things that all of us can look and say it's not fair. Like how the algorithm picks number 1 or number 2. It's not fair.
Yeah, true,
but
true.
but if we define who we really are slowly by slowly, that won't affect as much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. I am so happy to hear that because I actually relate with
Yeah.
you because I know
Yeah.
those are questions that have passed through my mind as well.
Yeah.
And like thinking, okay, so what do I do? You
Yeah.
know?
You know, you might never, in terms of even advertising on podcast, there are things you won't advertise on a mental health podcast.
Mm-hmm.
The things that means there'll be less money in terms of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be less listeners. Who wants to listen to a podcast talking about depression at 2 a.m. in the morning?
I know.
Who wants to do that?
Yeah, someone once told me that the moment you listen to a podcast on depression, you become
You'll
depressed.
become depressed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a tough place to be in. But for me, I think my podcast has been the one that has run for I think for long and consistently for in
Mm-hmm.
terms of mental health. I remember I used to see people who did like 3 episodes talking about depression and then disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's those who do 5. I've done like a whole year. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's something I'm proud of myself
Mm-hmm.
for doing. Um, and again, it's informed by what I define as success in the industry. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I just defined it for myself, and I'm fine with it. I'm fine with not being number one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow, that's a good place to be in.
yeah,
That's a great place to be in. I'm
yeah,
right behind you there.
yeah,
Now, one last question
yeah.
before we get into the rapid fire.
Okay.
Um, what would you say? Um, what would you say is your secret to success? Because you are actually the number one mental health podcast on Apple Podcasts.
The secret to success:
Uh huh.
being me,
Being yourself.
being me.
Mm-hmm.
For so long, I struggled with being me, actually knowing who me is,
Mm-hmm.
until one day when I was at work, when I was just starting to do radio and stuff like that. One of my previous boss, he's the one who once, he was still new to the job, and he once just pulled me aside and was like, you know what, man, I like how you talk.
Mm-hmm.
I like how you speak. I like how you just don't struggle with doing so, with doing what you do. And I was like, really? You don't think I struggles? Like, no, I think the way I speak to you right now is the same person I listen to on the other side. And so I realized, so I don't even have to shout. Also, I don't even have to change who I am for, not for me to be accepted, but for me to do something that is meaningful. And so I just pull all that energy into the podcast. Sometimes I record with my foot on the chair.
Mm-hmm.
So I've once recorded while I was literally almost upside down, like I had
Okay.
my back on the floor and then my legs were up there, and
Mm-hmm.
I recorded the podcast, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't struggle. I was just
Mm-hmm.
there talking to the microphone, and I realized that there's people who, when they message back, they say they like how calm the podcast is,
Mm-hmm.
how it's not noisy, and it's not about the equipment. I think it's just me sitting there and talking to the microphone,
Mm-hmm.
like I'm talking to somebody on the other side. So I just say it's just being me. I never want to change who I am, even with the struggles. I can't shout. I realized that I can't shout,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a superpower somehow. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that yes, there's podcasts or things you'd want to shout and be bubbly and stuff like that, but I'm not. I'm very introverted. um I don't talk about myself a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody asks about me on the podcast. So that's something, you see.
Mm-hmm.
That's something about me being me. I don't struggle to push myself so that people can accept me. I'm just there, and there's people who like what I do, and that's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what tips would you have for an upcoming podcaster like myself,
Start now.
especially in the
Oh, in
mental
terms of
health and wellness
I'd
space?
say in terms of starting, you want to start a podcast. Like, just start now.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of messages, especially on Instagram. Like, where do I start?
Mm-hmm.
How do I start? What equipment do I need? And my question is, even if you have like, look at all these things around here. Look
Mm-hmm.
at these slides.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're so cool.
Mm-hmm.
But even if you have them, and they tell you like there's like 3 cameras right now, and you
Mm-hmm.
sit here and you have nothing, there's no difference.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
um I had equipment, I had my microphone, I had my sound card, I had everything, but I didn't have the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you have the idea, that's the most important thing. And then the second thing is do it, and then do it afraid. Do it afraid. Do it with what you have. You could start with recording your podcast on on your phone on you could just need to put your microphone in, get into your closet and record. Just say whatever you need to say. If you've read the book Big Magic, I think that's the book that I love when it comes to creativity. Liz Gilbert talks of just starting with what you have. And then when you do, you won't like the first episode. I can assure you, nobody's first episode is cool, but the second episode will be better than the first one. The noise in the background will be better because you'll have put it out and somebody told you, "Ah, I don't like it."
Yes.
And you don't like it. So the best thing you can do, the best advice I give people is start right now with what you have, with where you are. Don't don't wait for equipment like this one to start a podcast because it won't help you if you
Yes.
still are afraid of doing it. You could
Yes.
have the best microphone like this one, but you're still afraid of starting the podcast. So the best thing is just start. Let all these things find you along the way. Start with that 100 shillings you have and buy credit and record instead of buying equipment and a big space, and then the podcast still work. You just start with what you have and where you are, and right now,
And right now.
and do it afraid.
And do it afraid.
Yeah, do it
Okay.
afraid.
That's my take home today.
Yes, please do it afraid. Do it afraid. That's my philosophy, and I got that from Adele Onyango. I think there's one time she posted on Twitter. She was like, "Whatever's been in your head and has been troubling you, this is your signal. Do it afraid." That was it for me. I was like, "I'm going in right now." Yeah. So just do it afraid. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. So now we'll rush into the rapid fire.
Okay. How many are they?
They're not many.
Okay.
They're not many.
All right. All right.
You're lucky because I actually lost the ones that I had
Oh
initially.
Jesus! Thank you.
So I came up with some.
Okay. All
And
right.
I call it the enjoyment circle,
All right.
where we just get to know a little bit more
Okay.
about you. Nothing intrusive, or
Okay.
if it's intrusive, we pass it.
All right.
You're allowed to pass, but only one.
Oh
Okay?
Jesus!
Only one.
1 out of 15.
They're about 13, 1 out of 13.
All right. Cool.
Okay, can we go?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
All right. What's your favorite food?
Favorite food?
Mhm.
Phew, that's heavy. Do I have a favorite food?
Cuisine?
No. Gosh, I hate everything, man. I don't think I have a favorite food.
Okay.
I don't think I have one. Next time we'll do this. I'll probably have a favorite food. Is ice cream included?
No,
No.
ice cream is not
No.
included.
I don't think I have anything that I'd say I'd eat this like all the time.
Uh-huh.
No. I'd be lying, man. I'd be
Okay.
lying. I'd be lying.
All right. If you could be remembered for one thing,
Yeah.
what would you want it to be?
For just sharing the message on mental health.
Mhm.
Um, like I'd want to be remembered having put out at least information for people who never had it,
Mhm.
like getting out of my comfort zone and doing something that nobody else had the courage to do, to talk of the most stigmatized conversation in the, around our country, our society.
Mhm.
I'd want to be remembered for just doing it and doing it afraid,
Mhm.
even with the struggles that I've had. I'd want to be remembered for that.
Okay.
And I think I will.
All right.
Well,
Um, are you an alarm and go person or a snoozer?
it depends. It depends. It depends if it's in the weekend or it's in the week. If it's in the weekday and I need to go and I'm late, I'll just wake up and go. But if it's on Saturday, nah, I'll just snooze and
You're
snooze and
snoozing.
yeah, snooze over the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you won $10 million today, what's the first thing you'd spend it on?
A new bike.
Okay. You like biking? You're a biker?
Yeah. I'd get a new bike.
Mm-hmm.
I'd get a KTM. That's the first thing I'd spend it on.
Okay.
I'll just get like one or two more bikes and
Mm.
then I'll be done. Then I'll do the rest.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge you're facing in your life right now, and how are you tackling it?
The biggest challenge I have. Um, I'd say figuring out my everyday life. Um, I don't know if I should schedule what I should do on a daily basis or
Mhm.
just vibe around the day. I think the biggest struggle I have is like planning what I need to do and following up on my plans because I write on my journal and then I follow up on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. By Thursday, I'm just flowing
Mhm.
and coasting through life. But I think that's normal. I think everybody does that. I don't know if it's just me who does that. Like
Mhm.
I'll follow Monday, I'll be on the high. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday, I'll just be off in terms of planning things and doing things. So I think that's the biggest struggle. If I ace it, which I don't think I will anytime soon, I think I'll be fine.
Mhm.
Yeah, but that's the biggest struggle I have. Yeah.
What's the first thing you notice about a person when you meet them?
First thing I notice,
Let me
hair.
give you a choice. Sorry?
Your hair?
Hair.
Well, I
Okay.
think so. Which choices was it supposed to give
I
me?
wanted to give you the energy
Yeah.
or their eyes.
I didn't even think of that. I notice people's hair.
You notice people's hair.
Well, that's like I could notice your hair.
Uh-huh.
Or you mean deep?
No, no, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's just as simple as it
Yeah,
is.
I think I notice people's hair.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing I do. Is
Okay.
that weird?
No, no, that's okay. That's
Yeah,
very much okay because different people notice different
I
things.
just notice people's hair.
Do you pick up people's energy?
Yes,
Okay.
a lot, a
Do you
lot.
protect your own energy?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
I do. I create a lot of boundaries with time. I think now that also plays part in my mental health with my
Mm-hmm.
struggles with anxiety. I don't have many friends. That's which for me is a cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's now in terms of energy. Um, I do protect my time. Like I get anxious when I show up late,
Mm-hmm.
so I try to show up early. That's me protecting, myself from feeling anxious when I'm getting late for a meeting or for anything that I do. So I do that a lot. I protect myself from I just create healthy boundaries. Sometimes they look toxic, but for me they're healthy. Like I'm not showing up for that thing on over the weekend, and I'll stand with my decision not to show up.
Mm-hmm.
You like it, you don't like it, I'm just fine with it. Because at some point I would just show up for
Mm-hmm.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't show up for everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'd rather spend time, in the house and sleep than do something that would have like some negative impact in my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I do. I'd say I'd create a lot of boundaries, which people's boundaries are some could look very toxic when you look at them from your
Mm-hmm.
perspective.
From your perspective, correct.
Yeah.
One more. What
Yeah.
scares you the most?
What scares me the most?
Uh-huh.
Heights.
Heights.
Heights. Heights.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything that scares me anymore. You know, especially with meds and injections and being put on machines all those
Mm.
years. But
Mm.
the one thing that keeps scaring me is that I can't be on KICC. Huko mwisho. I
Mm-hmm.
just can't. Even this building, I think this is second floor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I still feel okay. All right. Yeah, I think heights scare me a lot. I don't know why,
Okay.
but they do scare me a lot. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Last one.
And I'm scared of
Uh,
spiders too. So
oh, and spiders.
I'm scared of spiders too. Yeah,
Now we know.
yeah,
We know what
yeah. I
to
just
do.
don't. Yeah, and what are the other ones? Scorpions. I've never seen one, but I just know they scare me. Yeah. No, I've seen one at the park, and it scared me from that day. Yeah, everything else, nah. But heights and those little things, yeah, yeah, those ones.
Okay.
Yeah,
Lastly, to close up,
yeah.
what is one question you wished I asked you that I didn't ask?
One question. Um, one question I wish you asked me. I think you've asked me everything I've wanted. Um, is there any question I feel you could have asked me? That's tough. You could have asked me. What would you have asked me? I've answered everything.
Mm-hmm.
honestly. And
Have we covered all the bases?
yeah, you've covered everything. But why do I feel like there's something you'd have asked me? You've asked me how I feel. You've asked me. um, no, I don't think there's anything you could have asked me. You didn't ask me if I'm dating, which is a cool thing
Mm-hmm.
because I don't like revealing personal issues. But no, I think you've asked me everything.
Okay.
I wished you'd have asked me
Mm-hmm.
in this year.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, Moses, for coming. I
yeah,
appreciate it.
yeah,
It was a lovely conversation,
yeah. I
and
liked it.
I hope that we can have many more
Yeah,
of the same.
please invite me over
Mm-hmm.
for. I should invite you over for my podcast too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm really happy. It's the first time I'm sitting on this side,
You
not
mentioned.
asking all the questions
Uh-huh.
and being the one driving the conversation. It's felt great. I should be doing more of this
Mm-hmm.
where I just sit down and do. Although I feel very sometimes uncomfortable because, as I told you, I don't put myself out on social media. I
Mm-hmm.
have my concerns. I just try to stay conservative,
Mm-hmm.
and that will never change for me. So when you invited me over, I was like, do I do it or not? Do I do it or
Mm-hmm.
not? Do I do it or not? I said, um, let me just do it. It's
Mm-hmm.
going to be the first time I do it. Maybe it would give anyone who's always wanted to know me in a different angle
Mm-hmm.
that space to do so. So yeah, I'll just go for it. I'm looking forward to more,
Mm-hmm.
but now I still have limits to it. But I'm really glad I was able to do it, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
feel nervous. So
Uh-huh.
that's something. Yeah.
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 And if it means anything,
Mm.
this is also our first video podcast.
That was your first?
Yes,
No way.
first video podcast. I'm also as nervous as you are, or
Oh God.
as
I've
as
never done a
worried about it
video.
as you are.
I've never done a video
Mm-hmm.
podcast. I'm not planning to do one
Mm-hmm.
anytime soon. Um, well, it depends. I was because I'm working on a different project for the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm not looking at. It's not that something I'm not contemplating,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I'm working on something very different
Mm-hmm.
for the podcast right now. Let me reveal it. So I prefer to just keep it audio, um, and I yeah, I prefer to keep it audio to just do the recording at my house and all of that. I stopped the conversational type and kept it the way it is,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm glad I've kept it that way. Yeah, I definitely want to do more video podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm very camera shy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're gonna keep it this way, I'll do it.
Ah, okay. Now we know. We'll get you. We'll get you back.
Yeah,
Actually,
this is pretty cool.
yeah. I want us to do one. Not even one. I want us to do three more.
Oh, with
Yes,
me?
yes. But
Oh,
I'll
Jesus, that's
share.
cool.
I'll share as we go
Yeah, that's really cool.
what we
That's
could.
cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's really
All
nice.
right, Moses. Thank you so much.
No,
Thanks for
thank you
coming.
for inviting me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap. Thank you all for listening to Wellness by Jeff podcast. I've been your host, Judy Fider, and I'd invite you to all like, share, subscribe on all our social media platforms.